Hello and welcome to my video series for CSCI 1060 Programming Workshops 1. I am Professor Michael, and I'll be going through in this video series how we coded all of the activities that we'll be doing in class. So this video is just going to be going over what we covered in our very first class in case you missed it or weren't able to follow along for some reason. These videos are going to be here to help you so that you can always go and reference what we did, see how I came about actually creating some of this code, and that way if you're ever wondering, where did this line come from, I have some explanation that I can give to you as to how I created solutions to some of these problems. So we're going to start off just by going over the first program that we wrote in class, which is a program that prints the text "Hello World" to the screen. Not something that's super complicated, but in C++, unlike something like Python, there are a fair number of lines that you need to be able to write in order to actually get this working. If you were to do something like you expected in Python, print "Hello World," this is what you would do if it was if you're in Python. Maybe you need parentheses, I don't know. When you try to run this in C++, C++ just complains to you and it says, you know what, I have no idea what print means, so that's no good. Now, if you try to compile a blank program in C++, the first thing that you notice is that the error message says something undefined reference to main. And what this is saying is that any C++ program you ever run, somewhere within the files needs to be something that is called the main function. It's the starting point for all of the instructions that your code is actually going to go through. So I need something called main, and this is essentially indicating to the compiler that, oh, hey, all the code you're going to write needs to start from here. Now, this isn't enough. If I try to run this, the next complaint that I get is that I cannot define main with no type. And what this means is that just like mathematical functions, which are supposed to return something given some parameters, I need to actually be able to have my program report when it's done using a value. And in this case specifically, it should be an integer. So I need to say int main to indicate that when my code is done running, it will say, oh, everything went a-okay, in which case it should give you a 0, or something went wrong, in which case it will you'll need to write code that will give it some other number than that. But now that I have this, at the very least my code should run and everything is okay. Nothing actually happens because I haven't written any code yet. But at the very least, I now have the starting point, the very bare minimum you need for any C++ program. If you don't have this right here, you don't have enough for your code to actually run. Now, we want to print "Hello World," and as we saw before, just writing print is not what we're going to need for C++ because there's no what print is. Instead, we're going to use something called cout. So cout, like this. The language C, we're going to output some text. Now, if I try to use cout right away, well, once again, C++ doesn't know what cout is. I need to actually grab this from somewhere. Now, I haven't actually built the C++ language myself, sorry. However, much more clever people than I have actually gone and written the implementation of how this cout code is supposed to work. So anytime that you want to get access to code that is in what's called a library, a place that you can freely access code, functions, or any kinds of other neat programming things that other people have made for you, you need to include it at the beginning of your program. And in this case, what we need to include is the input-output stream library, essentially, which is the source from which I can actually call cout. Now, if I try to finish things, I try to actually output to cout, we're going to see a few things that are going to go wrong. So first off, let's see what the first error is. Okay, so the first error is, once again, C++ doesn't know what cout is. Cout was not declared in the scope is essentially an error message that says the C++ compiler couldn't figure out where this word is coming from. Now, it does happen to have a hint for you. Did you mean std : cout? And what this means is that cout is part of the standard library. It is, in order to actually access this, I need to do one of two things. Either I can write it like this, which gets kind of annoying, or you can write the following line using namespace std. By having this line in here, anytime that C++ runs into something like this cout and isn't sure exactly where to pull the information about how it works, the first place it will check is anything that starts with std, like std here, over here. And now I won't see this message pop up anymore. I'm going to get something different, probably another kind of error message, but let's see what it says. Okay, so now another error message, which is super important for C++, expected semicolon before return. And what this means is that there's a very important rule for C++ that does not apply to Python, which is every line of code that you write that's a single statement needs to end with a semicolon. I don't believe this line does because it's an include statement, but every other line that's actually a single line that says do a thing needs to end in a semicolon. So I need a semicolon after cout or it's not okay. Now everything is great, but I'm not actually printing anything, so cout right now is just sitting there doing nothing, just looking pretty. I want to actually output hello world. Now if I try to do that, hello world, let's see what happens. Once again, it says expected semicolon before string constant. And now what this means is that we're starting to get to the point where C++ can't always predict exactly what you're looking for. C++ seems to think that what we actually wanted to do was just this. Cout and have a string here, have some letters here. Nothing again is actually happening. What we want though is we want to take this message, hello world, and pass it into our output. We want to take this and direct it towards the screen, really. We want to be printing out the message. So instead of a semicolon here, I actually want these two arrows. And these two arrows are a convention. That means take this and send it over, redirect it into cout. And cout is going to print stuff to the screen for us. And so when I run, hello world. Now, one last thing to keep in mind is that, let's say I wrote hello world twice. You'll see something kind of inconvenience happening. Look at that. All my hello worlds are all in the same line. So one last thing to keep in mind when you're printing stuff is that by default, you don't actually go to a new vertical line every time that you're printing something. Python, I think, does this by default for you. C++, unless you tell it you want to go to a new line, it doesn't. So there's two ways to do this. The way that we did it in class, and I guess I'll just leave this here so you can make sure that we go to a new line, is to add the end of line to your to what you're printing. So we're going to print hello world, and then we're going to print essentially the equivalent of you hitting the enter key. So this way when I do it, hooray, they're on two different lines. The other alternative you can is to use a special character, which is /n. So anytime you see /n, you'll notice already that it appears in blue font here. Depending on what editor you're using, you might see it has a different font, you might not. But this indicates that this isn't literally going to print a / and an n. It's actually going to print this new line space. So if I leave both of them there, it should do two of them. And indeed, you can see it's the equivalent of hitting enter once and then hitting it again, because both this and this are basically equal. And that's it. That's our first program. We can print hello world to the screen, and we're all happy with that message. So next video, I'll start going into lecture 2 stuff, but for now, I will see you there.